Our guest today is Hannah Puder, who is the producer-director of the new documentary Operation Arnon. That's next on The Bruce Collins Show.
Flip on the switch, feel the static clear, naming the glow, yeah, the reason we're here. From the edge of the map to your kitchen chair, he's talking wild truth like he owns the air. Out past the highway, out past the mall, where the sand keeps secrets, you can hear that call. It's the Bruce Collins Show. Hey! The buried up for dusting, taking control from the desert wind to your radio. We're the loyal knights of the wobbly table, laughing loud, keeping legends stable. Yeah, the Bruce Collins Show. Funeral rides high over dust and stone, stories like sparks in a cyclone. Strange little kingdom made of coffee and chords, where the late night callers become the lords. Crowns made of stickers, capes made of flannel. We pledge our oaths to the glowing panel. It's the Bruce Collins Show. The buried up broadcasting, stealing the glow from the desert wind to your radio. We're the loyal knights of the wobbly table, raising mugs, making myths and fables. Yeah, the Bruce Collins Show.
Welcome to The Bruce Collins Show. I'm Bruce Collins, the Baron of Broadcasting. My co-host is Chad the Odometer Miles. Our guest today is Hannah Puder, the filmmaker for the new documentary Operation Arnon, which recounts the daring high-stakes IDF hostage rescue mission conducted in central Gaza's refugee camp on June 8, 2024. If you want to join the Bruce Collins Show community, you are free to join our page on Facebook. And also, we always appreciate it if you can subscribe to our channel here on YouTube. I also have another YouTube channel called Bruce Collins Racks and Stuff that you may also enjoy. And now, on with the show. Allow me to introduce my co-host, Chad Miles, and also Christopher Cartwright. Hello, gentlemen.
Hey, Bruce.
Hola.
You know, the studio looks different tonight.
Yeah, Christopher painted it on his day off with the help of the Keebler elves.
Oh, that makes sense.
We can't say Keebler Elves. They're not a sponsor.
What can we say?
Wait, let me guess.
Okay, go ahead.
We can say that they were generic midgets.
I'm not sure we should.
I think he already did.
Hey, Chad, didn't you go to the doctor the other day?
Yeah, that's right, I did.
How was it?
Everything was okay, but the doctor's so depressing.
How so?
Well, he told me that being healthy is basically dying as slowly as possible.
Wow. I think he should look for a better job. Maybe Burger King.
Chad, you are always misinterpreting things. I once told you to have a good day, so you left the studio.
I saw a new study that said humans eat more bananas than monkeys.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, and I think that's true. I've ate a lot of bananas, but I never ate a monkey.
I think you missed the point, Bruce.
I think it might be time for the Chad Miles report.
Yeah, because as the doctor said, I'm peeling great.
With the dumbest news of the week.
Coffee stain on his collar, name tag hanging wrong. Sleep in both of his eyes, red light flashing strong. He shovels up to the camera, cracked mug, crooked tie. Says, I've seen some stupid stories, but this one made me cry. Oh man, it's the Chad Miles Report headlines. The dumbest news of the week. From Florida man fights lawnmower to influx with concrete. We tune in for the train wreck. We can't stop, we lead into read. Yeah.
You just heard that rip-snorting theme song there. Chad, take it away.
Article number 1. Sterling Nasa, a student of politics and international studies at the University of Sydney, found himself in an unusual spot recently, behind an electric keyboard during a live concert of the La La Land movie score. The 21-year-old was in the audience for the May 30th concert at the Darling Harbour Theatre in Sydney when a composer and conductor, Justin Hurwitz, made an unusual request from the stage during intermission. Did anyone in the audience know how to sight read? That's not a good sign.
No.
The orchestra's keyboardist had fallen ill, and local reinforcements were too far away to make it to the theater on time. I figured nobody's as close as they were, or as they say they are, Hurwitz said, so I just thought, well, we have 2,500 people in here, the audience, and despite NASA's background in music, he plays piano, organ, and bagpipes, he was initially hesitant to volunteer his services. But with encouragement from his friend, he headed down to the pit. If being thrust into the spotlight weren't enough, NASA also had to play a tricky piece. John Legend's Start a Fire, which has a complex solo that synchronizes with the character Sebastian, who's played by Ryan Gosling, frenetic piano solo on screen. With no time to prepare, NASA improvised the piece, earning him a rousing ovation. To be able to play a really cool solo in the right key, in the right scale, on the fly with no rehearsal, it was remarkable, Hurwitz said.
Do you
Well,
think he
from
got
The
his money
Guardian.
back?
Yeah,
I mean, he paid for a ticket for the
they had to
show.
pay him.
And you always have some stupid friend that's going, come on, you can do it. Go up there and play.
No, go ahead.
That's still impressive.
Yeah,
Very.
I once went to a Lakers game and played basketball for a few minutes.
Wow, really?
No.
Before security got involved?
That's right.
Tackled him.
Before I went to the institution.
Article number 2. Brendan Aronson, age 25, a forward for the U.S. men's national team in the FIFA World Cup, missed practice on May 29th for a very important reason: his wedding. He and his high school sweetheart, Melania Dabra, booked their wedding date over 2 years ago. Aronson realized the scheduling conflict in March. He
Oops.
just figured it out.
Yeah.
But a conversation with head coach Mauricio Pochettino, I'm probably getting that name wrong, put his fears at ease. He could take a day to attend his wedding without losing his status on the team. The couple married in New Jersey, not far from where they met. Aronson had to leave shortly after the wedding to get back to the team. It's not easy to be leaving on a wedding night, but she's been with me since the beginning, Aronson said of his wife.
Yeah.
She knows how many days we've been through doing all the football stuff. For her to be as cool as she is amazing.
Yeah.
That's sweet.
They rushed it. He was wed in his soccer shorts. They were like two antennas. The wedding was rushed, but the reception was fantastic.
Article number 3. One Australian designer is taking ratty clothing to a new level. Rat Oddity Gizzard, known for using taxidermied rats to make unusual creations, recently released a line of clothing they're calling lingerie, pronounced like lingerie. Oddity Central reported on May 29th. Unfortunately, it's exactly what it sounds like: taxidermied rats sewn into underwear.
Gross.
Wow. While the garments aren't meant to be worn, Rat Oddity Gizzard's Instagram audience begs to differ, with followers claiming to want to surprise their partners. The lingerie, get this, the lingerie sells for $137 a piece. And yes, they do offer international shipping.
Is that
weird.
Victoria's Secret? No, it's Rat Oddity Gizzard.
Have fun being single.
That's a secret.
Yeah,
Just keep
if
it.
you buy their lingerie, you get a free bowl of rat breakfast, mice Krispies. A new term for men who have wives who wear rat lingerie: brodents.
Rodents.
Article number 4. On May 31st, a French museum reported a theft, not of precious jewels or a priceless painting, but of fruit. A banana, to be precise. The banana had been taped to the wall as an artistic piece called Comedian by Italian visual artist Maurizio Catalino. I totally got that name wrong. A security guard noticed the banana missing from the Pompidou Metz Museum, and the museum has lodged a criminal complaint for the theft against persons unknown, Gulf News reported. The banana is typically replaced every 3 days, and the museum says this is not the first time the fruit has been stolen. A hungry visitor helped themselves to it last July. Comedian is valued at $120,000.
Wow.
Of course it is.
And they said the thief,
Wow.
when they tried to catch him, he just was just like a banana. He split.
He split. Article number 5. Eric Piersois, 48, of Butler County, Pennsylvania, is facing charges of causing a catastrophe, reckless endangerment, and disorderly conduct after using an excavator to tear down his family's house after his wife told him she wanted a divorce.
Wow.
Now it's for sure.
Man. Okay.
Ruined the house.
On May 28th, CBS News reported that Piersois had been out drinking, of course, and when he arrived home, he and his wife argued, and she told him she wanted a divorce. According to the police report, Piersois told her, "If it's over, I'll tear this house down." And he did, with his wife and 2 children still inside. That's not good. That's bad. Sounds of destruction could be heard on the 911 call. It's choking me up just thinking about it.
I know.
Piersois then entered the home to grab a gym bag and fled the scene. He was apprehended in a nearby township. Luckily, no one in the home was injured, and his wife is seeking a protection from abuse order.
Yeah.
The house suffered irreparable structural damage and likely will need to be demolished.
Wow.
That's from CBS News.
Talk about an overreaction.
That's crazy.
Yeah, you know, it's ridiculous. You want to avoid the divorce, so you tear down the house. That's a good one. Good idea. That's sort of like those smart people who think they're not dumb because they think they're smart because they didn't eat the Tide Pod. They bought a generic one at 50% off. Hey, thanks guys for joining me this week. And up next is Hannah Puder, the filmmaker for the new documentary Operation Arnon. In a moment. Our guest today is Hannah Puder. Hannah Puder is a media professional with over a decade of experience in the film industry. As a producer, she has worked on feature documentaries and numerous short-form documentaries, while also producing commercials in the DMV area for the past 8 years. Hannah holds a bachelor's degree in film and communications and a master's degree in business law from Regent University. Hannah is the producer and director of Operation Arnon, a story of hope and sacrifice. Hannah Puder, welcome to the Bruce Collins Show.
Thank you, Bruce, for having me on.
Now, the DMV area, I believe that's not Department of Motor Vehicles. Is that the Washington, D.C. area?
That's correct. Yeah. So I'm in about mid-Virginia area. And so my work is through Richmond, D.C., Maryland, all up there. Yes.
I used to work for Xerox many years ago, and I had to go to what they called the Xerox Document University. It was in Leesburg, Virginia. So I was there quite a bit and flew out of Dulles. Anyway, as far as DMV, I probably could use a couple of Department of Motor Vehicle videos. But tell us, Hannah, how did you get involved in films?
Yeah, so I kind of grew up always interested in film, and then when I decided that's what I wanted to do with my life, I went to film school, and then later my master's in business law to work as a film producer. And from there, the idea of film school is always you make these connections, you get started, and your film career just kind of takes off. Well, only a couple years after I finished film school and started working as a producer, we had COVID. So I think, that totally changed the landscape of the entertainment industry. And from there, it was no longer this typical Hollywood system. You go to Hollywood, you make it or you don't, you make it, you break it type system. It's really spread out now and all over, film producers and directors working, on different projects with different studios that have popped up. So it's definitely a different landscape now than when I first joined the industry.
Hmm. And can you tell us about Palladium Pictures?
Palladium Pictures is the executive production company that I pitched this idea to, Operation Arnon, the documentary that I just finished. And they're in the Washington, D.C. area, and they have a program that if you have an idea that you want to pitch similar to the studio system in Hollywood, but on a smaller scale, you can come, you can pitch your idea, and if they like it, they'll executive produce it, they'll handle some of the funding elements and help on the distribution side.
Awesome. I have a friend. His name is Brett Wagner. He was the voice of Monster Garage on the Discovery Channel. And crazy story. I was a wrestling promoter many years ago, a failed one, and he played the part of a wrestling manager, and then later got into Hollywood. And he was in the movie The Crazies. If you've ever seen that movie, he was the guy at the end who caught on fire. Anyway.
Oh, wow. So stunts.
Yeah. Well, no, he was an actor, but the stunt coordinator, which was a guy named Chris Carnell, who I knew also, he passed away, unfortunately. He talked him into doing that because he thought it
Wow.
would be better if Brett Wagner did it than the stunt man. So
I've
strange
done
story.
some stunts. So I also do acting. I've done some stunts, and I gotta say, I mean, it's pretty. You get into some wild stuff. My stunts have been much more moderate. I've done stuff in the water. I've done rolling and falls and stuff like that. But getting lit on fire, that's a stunt. That's a one to tell the grandkids about.
Do you know Chris Carnell? Did you know him?
I don't know.
Okay. He got his start in the movie The Panic Room with Jodie Foster. He was the one where Jodie Foster hit, I think the real actor was a country western singer, hit him over the head with a frying pan, and he fell down the stairs or fell down the steps to the floor. And he said he had to do that over and over again, and his wife was like, you're covered in splinters, and you're not going back tomorrow. And he said, but this is the opportunity of a lifetime. So anyway, sorry to get sidetracked. Now, Hannah, do you remember what you were doing on October 7th, 2023, and how you learned about this atrocity?
Yeah, I don't exactly remember what I was doing, but I do remember being pretty appalled. I mean,
Yeah.
initially, when October 7th first happened, it was like Israel's been invaded, which, Israel is every so many years at war, but the way that it took place, the fact that Hamas came in and just invaded communities, right? So it wasn't just like a military to military assault. It was an invasion of a community environment, primarily attacking civilians. And there were some soldiers there who, engaged and got involved as well. But most of the victims in October 7 were civilians, unarmed civilians who, of course, had no idea that this was going to happen. It definitely brought some reminiscence to 9/11. Which, I am old enough to remember 9/11. And I think every American who remembers 9/11 can tell you exactly where they were on 9/11. And even though I was only probably 11 years old, during 9/11, I can tell you exactly what I was thinking, what happened, the atrocity of that day. And for Israel, this really is a similar situation where and the magnitude of it is that it's an attack on civilians, right? So for us,
Right.
9/11, who would think a civilian building would have been demolished? Several buildings were hit, right? And civilians died in different areas throughout the U.S. due to those attacks. But it's the same kind of idea. It's just kind of like, what? Like who attacks? Who makes your military assault specifically on civilians? And then for October 7, the horrors of it. So much of what really happened that day wasn't fully covered, mainly because it is horrific, but also because people didn't want you to hear how
Mhm.
bad it really was. And I have gone through and seen a lot of the body cam footage from Hamas and seen a lot of the aftermath of people filming afterwards. And it is gut wrenching. I mean, you can clearly see that there are women in cars that just you can clearly see someone just took a gun and shot them in the head, and you see all that. You see the carnage. You
Mhm.
see people sprawled out, and clearly they were raped multiple times and then killed. And like from the forensics, right, of what happened, you just even looking after the fact, you can see how absolutely vicious and wild these attacks were, and the fact that they happened on civilians primarily. I
Mhm.
think that's kind of the gut wrench that anyone would be like, who does that, right?
Right. Right. So your documentary again is Operation Arnon: A Story of Hope and Sacrifice. So I understand the horrific nature of this. This is almost a redundant question, but what first compelled you to tell this particular story instead of simply consuming it as another headline in the news cycle?
So following October 7, due to living in Virginia and some of my past work, I tend to follow military elements and special operations and stuff like that. Where I'm located in Virginia, we have some of our special force groups that train here a lot. So I know a lot of people in the military. I know people that are tier one operators. And so following the war, I came across Operation Arnon, which is a tier one hostage rescue operation. And it didn't really get a lot of attraction in the American media. And if you think about let's go back to October 7 and then move forward a little bit. What was the big piece in the media? Of course, some was the attacks, but it was the hostage rescue, right?
Mhm.
Because they took 251 hostages. So what was the big push on the media? Bring the hostages home. Get the hostages home. Well, there's only two ways to do that. Either negotiations. Oh, so that would be Israel negotiating with Hamas, which of course initially there were no successful negotiations for many, many days, which is why most of the hostages were not released through that means. So you either have negotiations, which up to that point, were failed, or you have to do a military extraction. Those are your only two ways to get hostages free. And so 6 months after the war, we're into 2024. Not many of the hostages had been released. And so this Operation Arnon that took place in June 2024, when it happened, you would have thought this would have been huge
Mhm.
because the whole thing was bring the hostages home. And here there was this operation that brought hostages home, but it didn't really get a lot of media coverage for several reasons. Well, one, it was a very proud moment for the Israeli military showing success, which the media didn't seem to want to cover the success and the joy of actually bringing innocent victims home. And then conversely, the operation was considered very controversial because they had invaded into the heart of a Hamas hotbed area, successfully gotten the hostages out, and there was controversy as to whether they followed international law, whether they, checked all the boxes while they were bringing the hostages out. All these things that the UN later ended up coming out and condemning the operation because they said, how dare you go in and rescue your hostages? There's these elements that you have to follow and all this protocol. And was it proportionate? Was it proportionate to rescue your hostages And that whole idea, is literally nonsensical when you think
Yeah.
about the horrors of October 7. A proportionate response, right? If you want to do, and this is always, in war, we always do this proportionate response idea. A proportionate response would be to go into Hamas and kill how many of their civilians and inflict the exact same crimes, which of course would never happen.
Right.
Right. So the whole idea of throwing the proportionate comparison out there is also nonsensical. And so due to these different elements, the operation really got condemned and didn't get a lot of coverage. Back to what I was saying earlier, knowing a lot of people in the military, my brother was in the Navy at that time, having personal family member in the military, knowing a lot of tier 1 operators, I thought to myself, these people, these military, these IDF soldiers and operators, they need a chance to tell their story because the media is not telling it. And the hard work and the sacrifice that they gave is just getting squelched and even condemned. They need an opportunity to share their story. And so that's kind of what started me on the idea of, I want to tell a documentary about this operation, interview IDF soldiers, interview the people on the ground, and let them just share their perspective.
One thing I remember hearing about back then, and I have seen your documentary, so I'm aware of this, but this is kind of a lead-in question. One of the difficulties that I remember hearing from, at least on Fox News, was tunnels. Was that part of the difficult situation the rescuers were in?
So most of the hostages that Hamas took back, the vast majority were kept underground in tunnels. And most of us have heard about, the tunnels of Hamas. But the complexity of those tunnels, over 300 miles of interwoven
Wow.
tunnels. And for most people also haven't seen the visual of that. So most of the tunnels were only like 3 feet wide. 2 to 3 feet wide. There were obviously larger areas within the tunnels. So if you get into a tactical military perspective, if you basically just have a hallway that barely fits a person, how do you get an extraction team in? You kill the bad guys, but you don't know what's behind the bad guys. Is the hostage behind the bad guys? So if you think about the tactical elements of going into the tunnel to rescue someone and make sure you don't have friendly fire or you don't accidentally kill a hostage, it's almost near impossible, right, to safely execute that type of operation. And so what made the conditions ripe for this hostage rescue is that for one reason or another, a couple of the hostages were brought above ground and moved into houses. And as soon as that situation came out in the intelligence that the IDF and the Israeli intelligence had on the ground, they said, hey, this is a ripe opportunity. We can go in and there is the possibility to successfully execute a mission here.
And so was that the daylight raid on June 8th?
Yes. So they ended up had about 2 months or so of intelligence going into this operation. Extremely complex. The operation was initially called Seeds of Summer. And so the lay of the land for this operation is, in the middle of the Nusrat camp, which is a refugee settlement in the heart of Gaza. 4 hostages had been brought above ground and placed into houses. And while those houses and the area was a hotbed for Hamas, by that I mean most of the people in the area were Hamas activists and terrorists. They embedded an Israeli intelligence several weeks ahead of time who actually went into the area dressed as refugees. They were on the ground, humid intelligence, watching what was going on, and they realized, okay, that's an Israeli hostage. And they watched, the houses and saw how stuff was moving around and that there was a opportunity due to the positioning and the timing to go and get them out. And it was a daylight raid on those houses. The military came in and created a perimeter around what was going on. They got in to those civilian houses and eventually, they got the 4 hostages out.
So the Operation Arnon was named after Arnon Zamora. Who was he?
So the operation was originally called Seeds of Summer, and it got renamed to Operation Arnon. Arnon Zamora was a chief inspector for the Yamam. The Yamam are a special operations Tier 1 unit in Israel, akin to, let's say, our Delta Force or Dev Crew here in the United States. If you're SEAL Team 6, if you're not familiar with the terminology, but basically they specialize in hostage extraction. So their main execution, they're actually Israeli police. So they're not part of the military. They're Israeli police. They specialize in hostage extraction and close quarters combat. And so Arnon Zamora was the chief inspector. He was over one of the units within the Yamam unit. And he actually was known previously prior to this operation for some heroic acts that he and his team had performed on October 7. So a little backstory on him. On October 7, he and his team, the Israeli military was not initially activated right away. And so, of course, they were hearing the news of the attacks and the kibbutz that were being attacked. And when he heard about it, and even though he hadn't been called up yet by his team, he called some of his teammates and said, "Hey, we need to get involved." And so him and a bunch of his guys jumped in a truck. They went to one of the nearby kibbutz. Kibbutz is an Israeli community. It's a small town. Went and killed over 100 terrorists themselves, just him and a couple friends, and saved that entire community
Huh.
from the attack. So he was kind of a local legend in Israel for what he had done on October 7. And when he heard that this operation was being planned, he volunteered. So all of the Tier 1 operators that were involved, they all volunteered. Unlike in the military, the American military, where you usually probably like voluntold, right? You don't really get to like volunteer for the missions you want to go on. For this operation, they did. He volunteered to go on this operation, and he wanted to be involved on the ground to help bring these 4 hostages home.
Hmm. So, given what you know after all of your research and making this film, Operation Arnon, a story of hope and sacrifice, what's your take on how the mainstream media handled this event?
It's pretty interesting that, as I'd mentioned earlier, you would have thought the whole world would have really rejoiced at this
Uh-huh.
operation, because who wouldn't be happy to hear that when terrorists have taken civilians hostage and tortured them, and some of them eventually died in their captivity, who would not be happy to hear that civilians got released, right?
Right.
It seems obvious, but that's not really the reception that the Israeli Special Forces and the IDF received when they successfully operated this mission. It got a lot of negative press and a lot of negative reviews for, how they conducted it. Should have even been something that they decided to do. And it got condemned by several members of the UN who actually went out and wrote, whole articles, like much of the war, condemning that Israel should have a sovereign right to go in and rescue their own people. And any sovereign nation, when invaded, should have a right to rescue its own civilians. And these 4 hostages were civilians. And so it did not get good coverage in the media, simply, I think, due to most people having an anti-Israel sentiment for whatever reason or another.
Hmm. I used to work for a company called Applied Materials, and we had an office in, is it Rehovot? Something like that. Rehovot?
Oh, in
Anyway,
Israel.
yeah, is in Israel. And they were some of the nicest people I've ever met. And as a matter of fact, when that happened, I reached out to them by email to see if they were all okay, which they were, because it was kind of in that area where that festival took place. And you saw those poor young people being dragged away into God knows what. It was a horrible scene. Um, but I've noticed in this culture, and I'm a Christian, and I've seen other Christians who even sort of have an anti-Israel, which is surprising to me. But how do you think this all ends when Israel's neighbors are raised in cultures that teach hatred toward the Jewish people?
Yeah, I'm gonna share a story that actually happened while I was filming this documentary, and I think it tells it better than I can.
Mhm.
So went to Israel on 2 trips to film this. My second trip, I was in Jerusalem, and I had to take the train up to Tel Aviv for this particular interview. And as I was going through, have you been to Jerusalem by
I
chance?
haven't been there, no.
So to go up to Tel Aviv, they do a lot of train transit. There's a lot of trains in Israel for main transportation. So I went into the train station to get on the train to go up to Israel. And as you're coming down this long escalator, it's like 4 stories long. So this really long escalator. And before I get down to the bottom of the escalator, I hear that there's a piano and someone's playing the piano in the corridor at the end of this escalator. So I get to the bottom. And there's a rabbi, and he's sitting there playing piano in this train station before I go to Tel Aviv. And I play piano, so I was intrigued. So I came over and I just kind of waited for him to finish playing. And he stopped playing after he finished his song, and he said, "I need a break. Do you happen to play piano? Because my replacement's not here." I said, "I do. I do play piano." He's like, "Great. You play piano, and I'm going to take a break." So I'm like, "Oh my gosh!" So I sit down and I'm just I didn't have anything prepared, so I'm just playing something, and he's sitting across the way listening, and he comes back over, and then he takes over and starts playing. And he said, "What are you doing here in Israel?" And I said, "Well, I'm actually here filming a documentary about Operation Arnon," which of course he had heard of because in Israel it is a famous operation.
Yeah.
And also contextually, the war was only the PCO had only been signed 10 days prior to my visit. So, the war, it was very fresh. Um, and he said, "What's the lesson that you're going to teach people in this film?" And I'm thinking to myself, he's a rabbi. Of course, he's thinking, what's the lesson? And I said, I'm not sure yet. Because at that point, I'd only had a couple of my interviews and I wasn't sure how the story was all going to come out in post production. I said, "I'm not sure yet." And he said, "You need to make sure to tell the people that while evil is very strong, and we are surrounded by evil," and I knew he was specifically meaning the Israeli people, "that good will win, and good will always win. And we just have to press forward and have hope that good is coming." And I knew, as a rabbi, ultimately the good he was referring to was the Messiah, right? So they're waiting for the Messiah, and that good that the Israeli people hold on to, is the hope of the return of the Messiah, that everything will be made right. But I'm also a Christian. And so, as a Christian, Messiah has come, but Jesus is still coming to
Right.
settle everything, to make everything right. And so until we ultimately have that settlement, the Israeli people are always going to, and the Jews are always going to be attacked ultimately because of their lineage and connection to Jesus. And so it was an interesting parable, but I think it really summarized the truth of what we see. The Jews will continue to be attacked. And one day when Jesus comes back and there's a final opportunity and many Jews will be saved, towards the end, the Jews are going to continue to face that persecution because they're the lineage of Jesus Christ. And so that's something, and even if people can't tangibly place that, like theologically, that's the background of what's going on and it fleshes out to geopolitics, and we see it flesh out in so many different ways, but ultimately that's where it comes from.
Yeah. And yet I can't believe that the mass of people that live in Israel don't suffer from some type of post-traumatic stress, because I feel so blessed when I see stories about, what they have to go through with their neighbors to live in the United States. Important piece is, where can people see your documentary, Operation Arnon, a story of hope and sacrifice?
Operation Arnon currently is streaming on Real Clear Politics. It's on their website, but a really easy way to find it is if you go on YouTube and you just type in Real Clear Politics, Operation Arnon, it'll pop right up.
Excellent. And again, we're speaking today with Hannah Puder, Operation Arnon. Are you currently working on anything that you can share with us?
I have 2 other documentaries that I'm working on. One is another special operation that took place in the Iraqi war, but it's a U.S. operation. So I'm in what we call like the research phase, where you're working through the facts, you're figuring out what is actually true, what is not true. So when you go to set out to tell your documentary, you know where all those pieces are at. So I'm in the research phase of that documentary, and then once I get all those pieces and my research aligned, then you officially announce your film and you start the funding and you go through the next process of pre-production. So that's currently the next documentary that I'm working on.
Excellent. Well, hopefully when that comes out, we can have you back. Hannah Puder, Operation Arnon, A Story of Hope and Sacrifice. Check it out at Real Clear Politics on YouTube or their website. Hannah Puder, this has been a real honor. Thank you so much for joining us this week.
Thank you so much, Bruce.
It's the Bruce Collins Show, where the stories flow. The theater of our mind, leave the world behind. Oh, the barrier of broadcasting keeps the dream everlasting. He weaves the dark with a thread of gold. A million tales in a world untold. Late night whispers never grow old. Oh, oh. Close your eyes, let the static spark. The voice of the Baron ignites the dark. Ideas soaring, breaking apart. It's the Bruce Collins Show, where the stories flow. The theater of the mind, leave the world behind. Oh, the barrier of broadcasting keeps the dream everlasting. He weaves the dark with a thread of gold. A million tales in a world untold. Late night whispers never grow old. Oh, oh. Close your eyes, let the static spark. The voice of the bearer ignites the dark. Ideas soaring, breaking apart. It's the Bruce Collins Show. It's the Bruce Collins Show, where the stories flow. The theater of the mind, leave the world behind. Oh, the barrier of broadcasting keeps the dream everlasting.
That's a wrap, falophilites. This has been a Bad Yodeler production. Good night.